Another one in terms of what are the intentions of the state regarding illegal immigrants who are already in the country? We are having challenges, and what are we going to do about that? And then I've also been having a look at a couple of the tweets coming about fraud ID documents, and that's a big issue. I think if we can address getting to the bottom of fraudulent South African ID documents. All right, let's go back to you. I'll continue to monitor what's happening online.
Leanne, thank you very much indeed. Well, let's touch on a couple of those issues before we go to our audience here. Pensioners and unemployed. Again, the cost seems to come up all the time. Let's start with the pensioners. Are they going to be paying for these?
No, they'll receive it free.
And the unemployed, who 140 Rand, he'll decide, do I eat or do I get a smart card?
Well, the unemployed, it's very difficult to distinguish exactly, who we'd be talking about and how we deal with that. What we have agreed is that pensioners will receive these for free, as well as first issue is for free. But taking up the new smart card,
there is that
you
cost.
Will have to pay 140 Rand.
Couldn't you ask Praveen Gordhan to find money somewhere else?
Well, fortunately, I do serve on the budget committee chaired by Minister Praveen Gordhan. And unfortunately, South Africa's economy is not generating sufficient money for us to be able to make all the concessions we would love to make. We'd love to do much more, but our economy's got to grow. We have to pay for the services we're provided with so that we grow our revenue base. Then we could do much more.
Okay, well, it's in our birthday month, so maybe as a birthday present, no? All right.
The birthday present is improved security.
All right, so the other issue was the contact details. So when you change address, you should inform Home Affairs.
You're supposed to, yes. It's actually, there's a little slip that comes, both with the smart card as well as in your green ID book. And it does request you, the citizen, the holder, to inform Home Affairs if you change addresses. Because it does make life very difficult for us if we cannot find you, either to deliver your smart card or to inform you of any changes that have occurred as a consequence of policy change.
And these changes, you'd have to go into the center. You can't do these things online with a PIN or something like that?
You could do online because we do have a very active website, but we would prefer that you approach a Home Affairs officer present.
All right.
We would like to increasingly be e-enabled, but it's a capacity we have to build much more.
All right, and then a big, big issue, and it's not just South Africa, it's around the world, and that's the migration of people. There are those that do it legally, that go through the front door, and then the others who sort of sneak in through the back. So what are we doing about illegal immigrants, particularly the ones that are in the country already?
If you are illegal, we must deal with you in terms of the law. And the law indicates that if you've entered illegally, you're either the subject of fines that are stipulated in legislation, but you should be sent back to your country.
And again, the big issue is it's at the cost of the taxpayers that these people are being sent back, isn't it?
Yes, every country does the same.
So how are we managing the finding these people? Do you have the capacity to locate them and repatriate them? And we're finding, from my own experience, you deport someone and they're back in 2 weeks' time.
Well, that's why we have to create a proper border management agency so that our borders are not as porous as they are at present, allowing access to people who are not entering the country legally, having insufficient protection in terms of fencing and so on, inadequate patrols. So the intention of establishing a border management agency is to address these very weaknesses.
And how do you find the people that are in the country already?
We have an inspectorate within the Department of Home Affairs. It conducts regular checks. Also, the police service, of course, are part of the support that we have. But we have to be very careful in the way that we exercise our responsibilities in this regard, because you don't want to find yourself beginning to interfere with persons who are legitimately in the country. You also have had problems with people using features as a means of deciding that a person is an illegal immigrant because the person is not in possession of a passport and so on. But that kind of approach is really harking back to the past and is something we wouldn't like to have.
How do you manage the corruption associated with this? And these could be people not even in your department, because we know that police officers patrol the streets, pick up people, and they're paying. They're paying them, and then they carry on. How are we going to manage that? Because that is a huge part of the problem.
We have a counter-corruption unit in the department, and what we do is any complaint is followed up and investigated. And where we find there's an official who's corrupt, they will face criminal charges. So if the public could, really become much more used to indicating, one, a bribe has been demanded from me, or two, I paid for certain services. We have a number of cases of fraudulent marriages that we're prosecuting through the courts at the moment. And several of these involve South Africans who have now come forward to indicate that they were paid to enter into these marriages, and they married an illegal immigrant in order to give them status. And we're actually dealing through the courts with matters such as this.
All right.
So we must be vigorous in maintaining the law.
Okay, we're going to explore that, I'm sure, quite a bit throughout the duration of this conversation. But let's get to our tables now and start getting some of the thoughts of the people that are here. Table number 10. I can't read your writing because you write like a doctor, but your middle name is Steve. Is it Morsi or Marcy? So you'll have to stand up and tell us your first name because you've written it in a way. Table number 10.
I'm here, Peter.
Yes.
My name is Steve Masi Masnamela.
Okay.
I think I've actually wrote some number of questions in different pages. Which one are you
I think let's start with the first one, which I can't read. What is something qualified to...
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's about the asylum.
Asylum, right.
Asylum,
okay.
yes.
Okay.
My question was that, what is an asylum and who qualifies to get an asylum? Under which status does a foreigner qualifies to be on the position of an asylum certificate? That's my first question.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much indeed. So asylum is one area that can be abused, but is necessary because some people genuinely need to seek asylum and refuge from where they're coming from. Yeah. So who qualifies for asylum and how do you check that process?
I'm going to ask the Deputy Minister to respond to that question.
Okay, Deputy Minister Chan.
Good morning. Morning, Steve. To answer your question very briefly, the issue of asylum seeking is governed by international law. People who qualify to be granted refugee status are people who are found to have been persecuted in their country of origin. So in South Africa, we are a signee to the Convention on Refugee Status. And what this means is that somebody comes into the country, applies for refugee status. That person is called an asylum seeker. That person has very limited and temporary status while the application is being processed. If the application is approved, that person is given the status of a refugee and is accorded similar rights to residents accept that that person is not allowed to vote in the country's elections, but is able to stay, work, study in South Africa while the refugee status is still in place.
Is that reviewed periodically? Because I would imagine a country like Zimbabwe, circumstances have changed. So somebody might have applied for asylum at a certain time. There's been an election. President Mugabe has won again. And so the question now is, are people coming from Zimbabwe still able to seek asylum? And those that have got asylum status, are they going to be sent back now?
Again, it's a very long answer to your question, but I'll try and be very brief. South Africa has a process where we look at the individual. So the individual applies and his or her circumstances is taken into account during the application process. We do not have a process like other countries do that look at the nationality of the person. And so a whole group of Zimbabweans can come and all of them get refugee status. That is not the situation in South Africa. We have an individual process of application. And yes, the status of refugees are reviewed. We've recently reviewed the status of Angolan nationals in our country who have refugee status, simply because the international community has recognized that the situation in Angola is normalized, there's a democracy there, and the economy is flourishing. Consequently, all countries who are signatories to the convention have agreed that Angolan nationals who fled the war of independence now would have their refugee status reviewed and would either have to return to their country or migrate onto the immigration system in their host country.
Okay, all right. Let's go to table 17. Thank you very much, Deputy Minister. Table 17, is that Johan and Rita?
Yes, that'll be correct.
Okay. You can ask your question, Johan. And
Minister, I would just like to know how you manage to look younger every time we see you.
I'm joking. It's because I get fewer emails from Johan.
There you go. All right, on that note, we're going to take a break. I'm going to get the real secret here because I'm getting into that zone, I'm afraid, where I look in the mirror and I think, oh dear.
No,
all right.
Same here.
Let's take a quick break and we'll be back asking your questions after this.